Welcome to the Crypto in Real Life podcast. Today we're going to talk about Bitcoin and if the dream of the ideas of Bitcoin are finally realized, what that means for reality. We're also going to discuss fractional NFT shares and other fractional investments and how that kind of relates to this idea that Bitcoin is going to monetize the world. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Not right now. Let's wait till we get into it.
Okay, cool. I was just double checking. So I put together a little bit of a presentation slideshow just to help guide us the conversation. So my first thought is if Bitcoin consumes the world, so that's like the general idea today. So what does that mean for Bitcoin if it monetizes the world? Like how will life be different, and what does that mean for your Bitcoin? So that's the stuff I want to discuss today, go through, and try to understand better because I think it leads to a lot of interesting game theory and ideas as to what would happen. Okay, here's a few Bitcoin facts for people who don't know much about Bitcoin or are just kind of curious about Bitcoin and to get a little bit to know a little bit more. Also, if you know about Bitcoin already, these might be new to you as well. So you probably know there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin, and that means 21 million Bitcoin ever mined. You knew that number, right, Clint?
I didn't know that specific number.
How many did you think there was going to be, out of curiosity, or did you even have a clue?
I had no idea. I just
You,
knew it was limited.
you did know it was limited, so you thought it might have been 100 million or something. You didn't really know.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so 21 million total will ever be mined. Now you know what I mean when I say mined. You're familiar enough.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that.
Okay, so and mining it basically means for performing very hard calculations to create a Bitcoin, and then you're rewarded with a Bitcoin. Then you can sell it on the open market or keep the Bitcoin, however you feel about it. That's what the miners do. For those who don't know, so many Bitcoins have been lost over time. Back in 2009 is when Bitcoin began. There were a lot mined at the beginning, and over time there's been many, many more mined. Like I said, there's been roughly 19 million that have been mined so far, with 900 being mined daily. So, but like the key here is many have been lost. Clint, you have a little story about that, right?
Yeah, actually, whenever Bitcoin, just came out back in 2012, um, I mined it briefly, and like whenever it started going up in price, like in 2016 or 17, I think,
Mm-hmm.
I went and tried to get access to that computer that I had mined that on, and accidentally wiped the entire hard drive. So I
I
lost my
never,
Bitcoin. So,
and I've been like saying, Clint, you've got to figure out how to find this thing.
yeah, we, I think it would technically be possible to get it recovered, but I
I think you
mean,
should try.
yeah, it's worth looking into.
I mean, I found some weird Reddit post about how to do it. I do you remember how much Bitcoin you actually had on the hard drive? If you, I know you
I
think it
I
was like one, but you don't know for sure.
I don't think it was that much. I
Maybe,
mean, back then I knew it. I didn't mine it for long. I mined it for maybe a couple weeks or so. So it
did you
wasn't
do it
like a
back in
ton.
2012? Is that when you did it?
Yes. Yeah.
So that was before it was like $100. I think. I think it was like in the 50 range, maybe, or 20 range.
Yeah, I remember it was low.
You probably at least got one because you're kind of the energy you expend is roughly what your Bitcoin is going to be worth. So you probably exerted maybe $20 worth of energy over the 2 weeks period. I would say. So you probably have at least one.
Yeah, I mean, if not one, maybe like close to it.
I mean, it's thousands of dollars worth for sure.
True.
Yeah.
But
Well, anyways, so there's stories like that. So let's just say Clint theoretically mined one Bitcoin. That's lost forever. So technically, there's not going to be 21 million Bitcoin. There's going to be 21 million minus how much have been lost and minus forgotten and so on and so forth. And people who, yeah, like, so there's not technically 21 million on the open market. There's been research and rough estimates are that there'll only ever be 14 million. Now there's some dispute about that. Some people say 15 million. Some people say 16. But I'm just gonna go with 14 because the folks that I read, they kind of came up with that number. That's what they estimate, and That sounds about right because I've heard there's stories of people of like apparently the creator of Bitcoin mined 1 million Bitcoin at the beginning just to get it started, and that wallet address has been locked away and never touched or anything. So the idea is that 1 million Bitcoin will never be used. So there's at least 1 million Bitcoin right out of the gate that's not in use.
And if somebody like loses a wallet or a key or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
it so is that Bitcoin permanently inaccessible?
Correct.
Okay.
So it works like a physical object essentially. So if you like your Bitcoin that you had on your hard drive, if you lost the key, you wiped your hard drive, you did something that destroyed. If you had it on a cold wallet, like you had on your hard drive, if you destroy that hard drive, it's destroyed. So it is very physical too, in a way.
Right.
So yeah, I mean it's gone forever. There's no way to. So like that's what I'm saying because of pricing and understanding pricing, and the supply is very important, especially when we're talking about if the dream of Bitcoin to replace everything and becomes the true economic value essentially. It's if that actually happens, supply is very very important. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because if there's 14 million of it or 21 million of it, that's a 50% decrease in price. You know what I'm saying? 'Cause there's 50% more Bitcoin if there's 21 million compared to 14 million.
Right.
So supply is very important. But there's 19 million that have been mined so far, with 900 being mined daily, roughly, or it might be exactly. It's something around 900. Every 4 years, the number of Bitcoins mined daily halves. So by 2024, 2020 was the last halving, and typically each time it halves, there's a big run up in Bitcoin prices. We've seen this. Well, yeah, every time it's actually happened. 2012, that's when it freaked out. Remember 2013, the year after everybody was talking about it, it hit $100. Do you remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
That was when I first heard about it, and I was like, "Oh, this is really cool. What the hell is this?" And I didn't know how to buy it, and I just said, "Screw it." I didn't really know what to do. 2016, it happened. Remember? Then it went way up
Yep.
to 17 grand in 2017. I saw it. I was like, I thought about buying it 8,000, but I was like, "Oh, I've missed the boat." Blah 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 blah. I'm not gonna fuck with it. 2020, it happens. 2021, we saw the huge run up. It hit $70,000. Hit $1 trillion. Now it's around 47,000. It's gone back down, but it always goes back down too. So the next halving is 2024. And at that point, there'll only be 450 Bitcoins will be mined each day. I didn't write that quite right, but every day going forward, it'll only be 450 at that point. So that causes, so the inflation rate right now is 900 a day, right? In 2024, it goes down to 450 a day. It halves. So that in and of itself will cause upward momentum to the price because there's less Bitcoin being made to be sold. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's why the halvings usually have a upper momentum for price. It also, I think, gets people talking about it too. So mining is a great way for energy companies and regular folks to get the value from their energy. So when you mine, you're converting your energy into Bitcoin, which has value. So it's a nice way to use excess energy and things like that. Bitcoin can be sent anywhere with any amount for free with the Lightning Network. Lightning Network is a layer two solution for Bitcoin because Bitcoin can only do like I think it's 7 transactions per second, or is it per minute? No, 7 transactions per second. That's what it is. TPS.
Yeah.
Seven per second. And with the layer two of Lightning Network, it can send like thousands of thousands. So it's practically free for low amounts. It's free pretty much. So I think Square app, the Cash app, has adopted the Lightning Network. So if you had Cash app and you had Bitcoin and I could send you Bitcoin for free basically if you had the
Wait,
Cash app.
what exactly is Lightning Network? Is that something that like who's developed that?
The Bitcoin community, the Bitcoin developers, the people who have devoted time and efforts to the Bitcoin. They realized there was an issue that the transactions per second. I mean, and the fact that it cost a good bet to send. Just like the problem is, just to send $10 worth of Bitcoin costs like 50 cents to a cold wallet or something like that. So in order to have transactions work for, like if you want to go buy a cup of coffee, the idea is, you could send $5 over the Lightning Network for free. So it's not like a big deal to spend Bitcoin. It's not costly to do everyday transactions. Big transactions were already good anyways, because if you're sending $1 billion, but even then you want to get the fees down to as much as possible.
Yeah.
So the whole idea is just to decrease the fees. The Bitcoin community worked on that. I think actually Jack Dorsey had the guy who owns Twitter, or excuse me, was the CEO. He didn't own all of it, and he also ran the company Square, to do the Cash App. He created a Bitcoin developer fund, and he did it for free. It was not to increase his bottom line. It was just he has Bitcoin on his app, and he wanted to make Bitcoin better, so he made a fund and spent I think he put $10 million or $20 million in it, and so that developer team was a huge part of the Lightning Network's success. It only came online at the end of 2021, so it's only been around for a few months.
Oh, okay.
So it's a pretty big deal. I mean, like I said, I could send you Bitcoin for free with the Square app, and not all wallets support Lightning yet. Like Coinbase does not yet, Robinhood does not. Another good point about that is it has to support Lightning for you to send it to another Lightning wallet, or there could be issues. So right now, it's not supported everywhere, but eventually everybody's going to adopt it because it's stupid not to, because it makes the Bitcoin network better. But it doesn't cost extra. It's just like an additional layer on top of Bitcoin, basically. Does that make sense?
Right. So it's like
it's called a layer 2 solution.
Okay. And so this is a layer that only the wallets interact with.
Right. Yeah. So okay. If you're buying Coinbase or Robinhood stuff, it's got nothing to do with it, really. This has got to do with you transferring Bitcoin into other wallets. Like if I transfer some to you or transfer to a cold wallet, it affects that fee. They do have to support Lightning, though. Not every wallet supports Lightning yet, but that's coming.
Okay, makes sense.
Yep. El Salvador has adopted Bitcoin as legal tender. You can pay for goods and services there. Totally, it's not taxed. It's not a taxable event. So if you're in El Salvador, buy a cup of coffee with Bitcoin, it's not a taxable event. They're not treating Bitcoin how the U.S. and other countries are treating it, as like stocks, essentially, which is basically how the U.S. treats it. Actually, a little bit different, though. It's not quite a stock. It's more like it's like treated like property, basically, which I think is fine, but they're treating it like as currency. So, whenever you go spend dollars, you're not taxed on the dollars you spent because it's a stock or something. You just buy stuff, right?
Right.
So it doesn't mean there's not sales tax. I don't mean that. Like there could be like a little bit of Bitcoin sales tax, and the El Salvador is also buying Bitcoin. It's basically like working as a reserve asset for a reserve currency for their system. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So they're buying Bitcoin. I think they have I can't remember the exact numbers, but I'm gonna say around 30 or 40 billion, tens of billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin they've purchased. And it's sort of working like how gold used to work as the gold standard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
The dollars are being pegged to the Bitcoin right now, and you can use if you lived in El Salvador, you want to send the government Bitcoin, you could, and it wouldn't be taxed as property. It would just be considered currency.
Right.
So it's not. So they're making it more friendly, essentially. Texas and other U.S. states are considering adoption. I think it's Arizona, but Texas is considering allowing you to pay for taxes in Texas with Bitcoin with the same kind of idea. So they wouldn't charge you income tax on the Bitcoin, or I don't think they have income tax already, but they're considering taking it as legal tender, which I think is a pretty big deal. Bitcoin is arguably the most secure payment network with thousands of nodes mining and protecting the network. So the more miners and the more hash power that goes into the network, the more powerful and stronger it gets over time. So here's a couple of graphs that I found from a Fidelity PDF that I think are kind of interesting. So this kind of shows the it's called the virtuous cycle of Bitcoin. Like the more users and holders, there's a higher demand, which means there's going to be higher prices because of how inelastic the supply is of Bitcoin, because it's pretty much set in stone. So the higher the demand is, the higher the price, because supply is not messed with. And that means there's going to be more miners because the price is going to be more attractive, which leads to higher security, because the more miners, the more nodes on the network, the more secure it is, the more attractive it is, and then you get more users and holders. So they call it the virtuous cycle. Does that make sense?
Right. It's sort of self-fulfilling.
Correct. Yeah, it's one of the. That's kind of a meme. Bitcoin is a self-fulfilling prophecy, and the prophecy is it's going to replace everything.
Yeah.
It's kind of an interesting way to put it, but it sort of is, because of how it works. So when people say that, it's not just a FUD or some bullshit. It's actually backed up by something. So here's another pretty cool graph. It shows what makes money good money. So you can see you got gold, Bitcoin, fiat. So gold was, that's been used for thousands of years. It's durable, obviously. It's very durable. It's a good, hard money. Bitcoin is as well because of how secure the network. Now you can lose it, like you lost your Bitcoin, and you can lose gold too, but that's your own fault. And then you got fiat currency. It's not very durable. I mean, it's just a number essentially. It's based purely on faith, right?
Right. So, is that what they mean by durable?
That's a good way to think about it. Is gold and Bitcoin? There's something hard backing it up. You know what I'm saying? Like there's a network behind it. For Bitcoin, there's a network that is secure, that is hard, and there's an actual thing physically involved with it. Technically, it is digital, but it is physical too, because you can lose it. So right. It is a durable good. It is something. Gold is also, gold will always have value no matter what. So if dollars collapse, gold will keep going up in value in terms of dollars, because gold is still a commodity. It's still a precious metal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Bitcoin will always have value too, I would argue, because it's a payment network that is very good. That's valuable. The technology is valuable in and of itself. Divisible. Gold is not very divisible. It's big, lunking gold bars that you have to transport. If you Fort Knox in the U.S.
Yeah.
Like they have just mountains of security, and it's like crazy. And they do that because it's kind of like an old school way of thinking, because people always come for the gold.
Right.
That's how they did it, and that's what wars were fought over gold, literally, like to steal other countries' gold, which is kind of like weird to think about. But people valued it that much, like it was known as the money. So which is kind of weird to me, because gold back then, what did they use it for? Like it was just used for jewelry, right? What else did they use it for?
Like what time period are you talking about?
Like Egypt times, like 1000 BC or 2000 BC or something.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Yeah, I mean, I guess like jewelry and currency, and I can't really think of anything else.
Yeah, it's just kind of. Do you think it's got a lot to do with just how it looks? That it looks pretty and like it's cool looking, and
I
it's
think
rare.
that's like the main draw to it, is that it's like a rare earth mineral,
right?
And it's pretty.
And people did make palaces with it too, so you could argue it was a good building material back then.
True.
So it's not used that way anymore, because that would be a crazy use of gold. That would be way too extravagant. But anyways, Bitcoin is obviously divisible. It's very, very divisible because it's digital money and it's easily sent. Fiat, that's the really good thing about fiat, is it is divisible. And by the way, we've only been on fiat since the 70s. We used to be backed up by gold. So it used to be gold-backed currency. So fiat is, which do you know what I'm saying when I say fiat currency?
I'm not. I know what fiat currency is. I don't know what it stands for.
Okay, so fiat I actually don't know what fiat means either. But it's not an acronym, I don't believe, but it just means to rule by fiat. So when I say I'm ruling you by fiat, I'm ruling by saying this is the way it is, buddy.
Oh, okay.
It's the government rule. It's government rule essentially. Like we're ruled by fiat. We believe in the U.S. system. People believe in their governments. It's belief basically in their government.
Okay.
That's all it really means. And fiat, like you can say stuff like the king decreed it by fiat or something like that. That's a way you could use the word. Um, Fungible. That kind of goes hands in hand with the durable. It's got worth, like inherent worth, like gold. You can use it to build stuff, like we said, jewelry. It's a material used in different electronics and things like that. Bitcoin, there's a network. It's very powerful, and it has utility in itself as a network. So and the fiat currency is like inherently worthless. It's just paper. You know what I mean? It's backed up by
Right.
belief. Portable, gold's obviously not portable. Bitcoin dollars obviously are. Verifiable, gold is not verifiable. Cash is not verifiable because you can send cash to anyone. Paper money. You can give paper money and totally subvert the system. And
What do
gold
they mean?
is the same way.
What do you mean by verifiable for like gold?
Can you verify all the transactions? I can hand you.
Okay.
I've got an ounce of gold in my house. I can hand you an ounce of gold and not tell anybody. It's not verifiable at all.
Okay. I see what you mean.
Bitcoin is it's a public ledger. I can go look at every single transaction that's ever happened since the beginning of Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. That makes sense.
But I don't necessarily know the wallets. The wallets are private. But if you find out who the wallet owns to who, you can. It's very. You can trace a lot of things. That's another thing that people say is that if you're a criminal, you would never want to use Bitcoin. That's ignorant
So
because it's a public ledger.
with like Bitcoin, if let's say I bought something or whatever,
Hmm.
does it have my name in there, or does it
No,
have like my wallet ID? I'm guessing,
wallet
or something
ID.
like that.
Wallet ID.
And
So
so people would have to know whose wallet that is, right?
right, but famous people, like I saw an interview with Mark Cuban. His wallet ID got doxxed. That's what they're going to call it in the future, I think. My wallet ID got doxxed. They're going to know everything I did.
I see.
And I could see in the future, we could talk about it a little bit more, but in the future, if the government finds out, excuse me, if Bitcoin does replace the standard, it becomes the standard, I think wallet IDs will be like a necessary form of identification that the government will want.
Oh
Does that make
yeah,
sense?
absolutely.
Yeah. So that will be like a standardized thing in the future, and you'll be able to trace all the transactions, and
Like
hopefully
a
it doesn't
bank
get too,
account.
right. Hopefully it doesn't get too crazy with that. Like hopefully it doesn't. Like, hopefully they don't get so crazy where they're like, you can't make this wallet without applying for it or something like that. Like I hope
Right.
I hope it still stays easy. I think it'll have to stay easy because it's so open source. I don't see how they could do that. But anyways, scarce gold, scarce. However, it does inflate at 2% a year. What I mean is miners who mine gold create about 2% of all gold every single year, roughly. So it is not limited forever. And also, we might run into a freaking asteroid one day and mine thousands of pounds of gold, and totally inflate the price. Inflate gold, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Bitcoin is scarce. We talked about that. Fiat, obviously not scarce. Inflation. And it happens all the time. Track record, gold has the longest track record for being money, clearly, for the historical purposes. Bitcoin has no track record at all. It's been around for 12 years. So that's probably the biggest risk here. Fiat currency, it doesn't actually have that long of a track record either. It's only been around since the 70s. So if we talk about
Yeah.
track records, it really hasn't been long either. So, all right. So I just think that's an interesting, more facts and thoughts to think about. Fidelity created this, by the way. Okay, so what does it mean for Bitcoin to monetize the world? What do you think that means?
Um, I mean, the way I interpret it is like Bitcoin encompasses all of the value of the world, I'm guessing.
That's a good
So,
way to
like,
put it.
okay.
Well, sorry, go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was gonna say, like, there is no, like, well, I guess there could be other currencies and stuff, but it would all
Yeah,
be like, it would all go back to Bitcoin.
right. It'd be the central way to measure all the value of economic value. So, like, the way I think about it is all the Bitcoin ever if it monetized the world entirely, that would mean that if you somehow had every single Bitcoin ever, you'd be able to purchase the world with it. Does that make sense?
Right.
But I mean, I think there's nuance
You
there.
mean all of the assets of the world?
Correct. Yes, you'd
Right.
be able to purchase theoretically when we're talking about monetizing the entire world. You'd be able to take Bitcoin and purchase every single currency, purchase every single every single stock out there. That would be monetizing it entirely. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So I think we're on the same page there. So this is what I put: 14 million Bitcoin. Guess we're going to go with that number because it's technically more realistic. Must be able to buy every single asset on Earth, which sounds crazy. Which I'm not saying this is going to be true. This is just some people think it's going to be. So it's kind of interesting to think about. Okay. So this is a table I put together. So it's the breakdown of all of the assets on Earth currently. So financial derivatives. Do you know what I mean by financial derivatives?
Like financial companies and insurance companies and whatnot.
That would fall more in line with equities.
Okay.
Actually, financial derivatives are like options and like puts on a company, calls on a company. Um, paper gold is a financial derivative. So anything
Okay.
that's deriving its value from something that actually has value,
I see.
which is kind of scary to think that 1.3 quadrillion dollars is in an asset that's derived from another asset. Do you get what I'm saying?
And yet it's the majority.
It's kind of scary, actually.
Yeah.
When I found this number, I was like, so $1,300 trillion, the vast majority of our wealth, or quote unquote wealth, dollars, are in things that are based on things.
Right.
So I was like, well, that just doesn't sound right. I don't know all the technical reasons why, but that doesn't seem good.
Yeah.
Global real estate is 365 trillion. That's all the buildings. That's all the like all the buildings, houses, everything across the entire world. This is worldwide, by the way. Um,
Okay.
oh yeah, and also that was one of the reasons why the housing bubble happened is because they had like all these derivatives based off of mortgage-backed securities. So that was the underlying asset for those derivatives was mortgages.
Then people couldn't pay their mortgages.
But think about what that. But think about it for a second. How in the world? So mortgages are loans to regular
Right.
folks. It's just God. It's just so crazy to me. But anyways, money supply. That's like all the dollars, like cash on hand, savings accounts. And I think there's more stuff in there too. But that's like hard. That's like dollar bills. So that's like, and I think it also includes loans. I don't know exactly all the, but think of it as just like cash basically.
The money supply would not include gold.
No, I got that
Okay.
separated. So that's like all the bucks out there.
Okay.
125 trillion dollars. Equities, 110 trillion. Also, there's something to point out. I didn't include like Chinese currency and all the other currencies and all that kind of stuff. So I didn't include like I didn't go too crazy with it. That money supply is the U.S. dollar.
Okay.
So technically, it might be a little more, but there's like 60 countries that are pegged to the U.S. dollar, so it's a pretty good a way to measure it. Precious metals, that's $15 trillion, and that includes gold. Gold's at about 12 trillion, roughly. And there's stuff like silver and all that stuff. I added all that up, it was like 15 trillion. Cryptocurrency is roughly 2 trillion right now. BTC is actually more like 800 billion, but it was at a trillion, but it's roughly a trillion. And crypto overall is 2 trillion roughly. Fine art and other collectibles, I found some data and it was roughly like a trillion. It's not that much, but it's still worth like pointing it out. So the total is 1.918 quadrillion dollars, or 1,918 trillion dollars. Is the total outstanding. So that's a lot of money. It's I was actually kind of surprised at the number. Does that number seem crazy to you, or what do you think?
It seems high.
Well, Apple as a company is worth 2.2 trillion. So it's just a small little nothing compared to the world's assets, if you think about it.
Yeah, I mean that's less than 1%.
Yeah, and the equities, what I mean by equities, that's like the New York Stock Exchange, like all the NASDAQ and stuff, all of the Australian Stock Exchange, Japanese, China's Stock Exchange, like all the stock exchanges of the world combined is 110 trillion. So this is like what's weird to me is there's only 110 trillion dollars in all the public companies. Oh yeah, that was something I forgot too. Is private companies. I didn't even include that in there, but there's money there too. But then there's like financial derivatives, which is money derived from like stocks and other random things, is 1.3 quadrillion. So you could almost just think of this as like debt almost.
Right.
It's just like weird. It's just so vastly. I mean, and if you think about it, like there's so much money in bonds too, and bonds to me, I think bonds are part of this financial derivatives that would be in that bucket. Like that's like debt, You're buying debt and getting a percentage of it. So I don't know. It's just weird to me that there's that much money out there in those things. But anyways, if you break it all down, here's the percentage of the total assets. That's like a percentage of the total. So Bitcoin is, or excuse me, cryptocurrency is only 0.01% of all the world's assets. And then I broke it out in that 14 million Bitcoin. So we got 9.52 billion Bitcoin are the derivatives. Global real estate is 2.6 and so on. And it gets lower and lower. So that's the amount of millions of Bitcoin that denominates each of these categories. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So the current price of Bitcoin in US dollars, if totally monetized, 137 million. So I got to that $137 million by taking 137 million, excuse me, by taking the 14 million Bitcoin, or excuse me, taking this $1.918 quadrillion and dividing it by the 14 million Bitcoin. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I did that and I got 137 million. So it's 137 million just divided by $47,000, which is about where it's at right now. That means 2,915 potential if the overall goal of Bitcoin is realized. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure I'm following. Okay.
Okay, so let's backtrack for a second.
Okay.
Let's say today, so all of a sudden, Bitcoin becomes totally monetized. It just happens magically. It's not going to magically happen. It's going to take a long
Okay.
time. But let's just say it magically happens. That means everything all the Bitcoin in the world, which is really roughly 14 million Bitcoin, has to be able to purchase everything. Right?
Right.
So you would find how much does a one Bitcoin cost? That would be take this number here, divide it by this number there.
Okay.
That gives you $137 million per Bitcoin.
Okay.
So I took the 137 million and divided it by the current price, and I'm saying the potential of the sky, the pie of the sky potential of some of these people are saying it's got this much potential. About 3,000 potential, 3,000x potential.
Okay. Okay, I understand.
That's why I got more interested in it, because I started hearing those numbers and I'm like, I don't actually think this will happen, but I mean, if the edge case of that does happen, that would be insane. If you have one Bitcoin, you have 137 million equivalent dollars. Like dollars, I don't even know how that would work. And it doesn't necessarily mean also that the US dollar doesn't exist anymore. It just means it's pegged to the Bitcoin. That's all that it would mean. It would mean all the different currencies of the world pegged to Bitcoin and how it's priced. Does that make sense?
Right. So it would be backed by Bitcoin.
Right. So I want to talk about that in a minute, but I wanted to go through one more. This is just kind of illustrate how this works. So here's the breakdown of all assets on Earth in 2042, so 20 years from now, assuming 5% inflation. So everything inflates like almost 3x because of inflation. And honestly, this inflation number is low. I just picked a number. So the total assets goes up to 5 quadrillion compared to the one whatever. But here's the key point. You see those Bitcoins? They stay exactly the same. because that's not
Okay.
going to deflate. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah. Because the number of bitcoins doesn't change.
Correct. So 2042 price, if blah 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 blah, if say it happens in 2042, which if it was going to happen, that would be more realistic than happening today, obviously. Then the price would be $363 million, 7,725x potential in 20 years. Just pointing it out. If not, it's not financial advice, but it's just a thought. If this does, if the dream is realized, as I've been putting it, so that's also just to show how inelastic the supply of Bitcoin is. Like, this will always be the same amount of Bitcoin. This is what changes because there's printing of the money.
Right.
Yep. So, okay. So I put this together. Like, how will life be different if that actually happens? Like, what's the first thing that comes to your mind in terms of, like, if everything's back to a Bitcoin, like, how does that
Um.
change how you do your savings and your investing and that sort of thing?
Hmm.
Remember, you don't have to worry about the dollar inflating because the dollar is backed by Bitcoin, so your money's not going to inflate.
Right. So, supposedly you wouldn't have to. Hey, what was it that we were talking about one day where like shouldn't the money or the value of Bitcoin just go up like
Yeah,
on its
because,
own?
right. Because inflation is this made up thing where the more money's printed. Not, okay, I put that in a bad way. Inflation is caused by money being printed and supply shocks and different things like that. It's the monetary debasement, and I kind of used inflation a little bit not correctly. Inflation does not necessarily mean just money being printed. Inflation could also, like the oil inflated because of the Russia war, you know. So
Right.
inflation is a combination of supply shocks and different things like that, and also printing money. So inflation is a combination of those things. So debasement is the money supply going up and debasing the value of your dollar today, which leads to inflation because there's more money that going around than there was before, and that same amount of money has to be able to purchase the same amount of goods and stuff. Does that make sense?
Right. And so over time, and the overall value of the assets of Earth would increase. I mean, just
Right,
that's in general, that's how it works.
because of technology.
Right. And so
S-
with that, just the passage of time would increase the value of your Bitcoin.
Correct. Because, okay, let me go through these and we'll keep talking. Assets will
Okay.
become deflationary in terms of dollars over time because assets are pegged to a non moving, inelastic supply technology called Bitcoin. That's what I'm talking about. So, your one Bitcoin will be able to buy, we'll say in the future, it'll buy a house. 1,000 years in the future, it'll be able to buy a house and a spaceship. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
That's the cool thing about this. So as technology increases, everyone will benefit from these fruits because a dollar. I should have said a Bitcoin. That I guess it'll be dollars potentially, and you might convert it to Bitcoin immediately because it's the true savings. But anyways, because a dollar earned and saved will be able to buy a bigger and bigger slice of everything. You see what I'm saying? So you're no longer like trying to escape inflation. You're not like, oh my god, I gotta put it in the Apple. I gotta put it into something just to escape this inflation that's happening to me. You'll just be able to put it in Bitcoin, and it will get better over time because of all the innovations that happen naturally, anyways. Because Apple will continue to innovate and get bigger and bigger naturally, and that same amount of Bitcoin has to be used to purchase the Apple and the other stocks and stuff like that.
Well, I do have a question.
Uh huh.
Um, so the value of Bitcoin is going up, and so everybody is becoming more rich. So, like, wouldn't it be offset, kind of?
Okay,
Because
I think I know what you're going to. Let me finish this real quick, and then I think I know what
okay,
you're saying. Supply of Bitcoin, the security of the network, and the mining of Bitcoin leads to the virtuous cycle. Okay, we talked about that a little bit. Houses and other goods and services will no longer be monetized. We'll talk about that in a bit more too. I don't believe those will be no longer be monetized, helping folks who actually need or want those goods. Okay, so I think what you're saying is, how can we just keep buying Bitcoin? Like, how are things going to get better? Are people going to invest their money? Is that what you're getting at?
Well, it's like if everybody's getting richer, it like is it just are they really getting richer, or is it just we're saying they're getting richer? If you
Okay,
understand what I'm saying.
I know what you're saying. So we're going to assume it's the future. Somehow this happened. There's 14 million Bitcoin has to purchase everything. So right now, you don't want to put all your dollars into a savings account, right? Because you know that's going to go down in time for sure, right?
Right.
And you don't earn crap for interest. So you put it into stocks, hoping to beat inflation. With that said, you're not really putting a whole lot of thought into the stocks you're buying. You're just buying big in indexes full of whatever because you're like, well, it'll probably at least beat inflation, right?
Right.
That's your thought process. So, in the future, that's going to put everything, if that happens in the future, that'll flip everything on its head. You'll no longer be like, oh my God, I have to invest it. You'll be like, I'll just buy Bitcoin and I will benefit from the technologies of all these companies that are creating it. And I will leave it in Bitcoin until I decide a company that I think will beat the overall technology rate. Do you understand what I'm saying? So if you think Apple in the future will actually is the most innovative company, you'll buy Apple. Or if you think Tesla or some other company is the most innovative company, you'll buy that. Because at that point, you're not talking about beating inflation. You're talking about beating innovation. You want to buy the most innovative one. You're going to put a lot more thought into it because that's how you're going to get true gains in the future. And in reality, that's what you should be doing to begin with. But instead, you're concerned about beating inflation because, frankly, a lot of people don't, when they're investing in index funds and different in bonds or whatever they're buying, they're not really thinking, oh, I really want to own this stock. Like, I really care about having this stock and stuff. I'm just trying to beat this terrible thing called inflation. So I'm just putting it in there. And there happens to be a lot of companies in there that are crap. Does that make sense? That you are supporting because
Yeah, that makes sense.
because you're just like, I don't have a choice. Just you're basically using it like a savings account. You're monetizing index funds essentially. So in the future, you'll be able to just create your savings, create your economic value. Like you work, that is value. You'll be able to keep your value and not getting debased because you'll always have the Bitcoin that is secure and the supply is limited. Does that make sense? So you get to keep your value. And then when you say, hey, I want to invest in myself. Hey, I want to go to college. Hey, I want to invest in the next big company because I think it's going to beat the other innovators. That's when I'll purchase that. So you're not going to just dump your money into indexes unless you think it's a fund that's really good. I mean, you might do that, but you're not going to be as haphazard about your dumping money into things. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
Because you're going to be like, hey, I've got this thing that's limited. And it's not going to screw me next year. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
It encourages people to make good investment decisions, really.
which is a good thing.
Yeah.
That's another. I think a cool thing about the idea of it happening is because I think people will make better investment decisions, like you said, and they won't be so concerned about just trying to beat inflation. You know what I mean? You're not like
And
we're
that's like
investing.
the main thing people think about, is
Right.
like
Exactly.
like with the savings account, it's like if it doesn't do more than inflation, it's worthless.
Okay, so that leads me to my next point. So right now, me and you and a lot of people are just kind of monetizing index funds, but we're also monetizing things that actually really matter. Houses. We're like, oh, we're going to go buy rental houses and try to beat inflation that way. Which is not a good thing, actually. That's a bad thing. Because that increases demand artificially for houses, which is why these house prices go crazy.
Yeah.
That's not actually a good thing. It's kind of a bad
Yeah.
thing. It would be better to allow the houses to be just like, it's a house. You own a house. Why the hell would I buy more houses? It doesn't really do anything for me. And then ever people can buy houses if they want to. I'm sure there will still be real estate people, but leave that to the people who are really into it. Like, everybody's thinking about, oh yeah, I'll just buy some more houses, blah, 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 blah. Like, that's not, you know what I mean?
Right. I mean, there's a limited supply of land to begin with,
And I'm not saying that will still be a strategy that people will do, but they'll be actually thinking about it. They'll be like, oh, I'm going to buy in this market because this market's down. Oh, I'm going to do this one. They're not going to be like, I'm just going to buy a house because I don't even know what I'm not even going to think about it that much. I'm just going to buy houses. Take more
right,
loans
right,
out for money that's free essentially, and just buy more houses, inflating the house prices. That way, people who are not so well off can't afford it.
right.
So that's not good. But I understand why people do that. It makes sense. I mean, it's just the world we live in. So you're trying to create wealth, and a way to create wealth that kind of rises with inflation is to buy houses, to buy goods, to buy index funds. Just whatever the hell you can get your hands on. It's better than keeping cash.
Yeah,
But it would decrease the need for that, and people like you and me, and people who are not as. I mean, I think we'll probably still be investing if it did happen because we think about stuff like that. But your average mom and pop, they'll just be putting their money in their savings account at that point because they don't really care, and they'll get to keep that money, and it won't be hurting them over time.
right. Yeah, like it
And,
would enable people who aren't investors or whatever to be able to maintain their wealth.
correct. So, and if you think about it, like the price of bread is like what, $2? It depends on where you go. There's some cheaper places that have for $1. But that price is technically more. I think bread used to be, it was definitely more than it used to be. But it has declined sometimes, and it's still pretty cheap relatively. But if you price it in Bitcoin in the future, this gonna be like nothing. You understand what I'm saying? Like it's gonna be like
Right,
nothing, and it won't be $1. It won't be the equivalent of $1. And over time, the price of bread will go down. It'll just keep going down over time because technology gets better and better. Does that make sense?
yes, yes.
I think that's just some ideas to think about. It like, hey, this is actually a good thing if it did happen. Doesn't mean it will happen, but it's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Let me double check.
And the biggest thing to me is the it not having to deal with inflation anymore.
Right. Because that what is that like we said, that means you're going to make better investment decisions. That means you can actually preserve your value, and you benefit. Here's the other big point. I don't think we really specifically mentioned, but we kind of implicitly did. You are benefiting from all the technology growth of the entire economy every single year, and that technology rate is roughly like 8%. That's like when Tesla's making the electric car, that's a huge innovation. Um, uh, Price decreases in bread because of technology. All these different technologies that makes our life. Amazon, that'll be another one. You'll benefit from all these things because technology is downward pressure on prices. So downward pressure on prices will actually translate to downward pressures on prices all the time because of the inelastic supply of Bitcoin. Does that make sense?
Right. It encourages everything to be cheaper.
Right, right. And some things do get cheaper, like TVs. The technology is just increasing so fast, it's beating inflation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why I saw you've seen such crazy, spectacular growth in software companies because they haven't been bogged down as much because of the physical, because it's not a physical nature to it. So you can innovate at the speed of your fingers.
Right.
That's why we've been able to. That's why technology beats inflation all the time because you innovate so quickly, and it doesn't make sense to try to buy anything else in terms of trying to beat inflation.
Right.
So, anyways, not investment advice, but
Yeah.
it's just this is what the idea would be if it did happen. So it's kind of cool to think about. All right, so I did want to segue into something else. That last topic kind of bleeds into why I want to talk about it. Fractional shares of graded cards, like this Michael Jordan here, looks so cool. Graded video games, which is what I'm into, because I think it's just a fun thing. Fine art, fine wine, and now NFTs. Okay, so graded video games, we've talked about it before. That's like an extra layer of collecting for video games. You can get it graded. and see how nice it's going to be. Same thing with basketball cards and baseball cards and whatever, any kind of card. And, fine arts, obvious, fine wine, and so on. So, what do you think about the idea of, because right now a PSA 10 Michael Jordan goes for like hundreds of thousands of dollars. This company buys the card from an individual, but does it by raising money and splitting up the value of the card in shares. Like they'll say, there's going to be 10,000 shares of this $200,000 card. Does that make sense?
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I think it's interesting. I think it's a neat way to make more expensive items available to smaller investors to invest in or whatever.
Right. I mean, I do think it's innovative for sure.
Um, I guess I would ask who owns it. I guess everybody owns it. Who owns a
Well,
piece of it?
right, and I'm assuming these are legitimate. you know, I'm assuming like whenever you want to go sell it, you could sell the share to somebody else, and I think what happens is I've seen them where they bought like a Mario Brothers for 100,000, and then they found a buyer. The company did for 400,000, and then they all cashed out basically at 4x. Everybody 4x their money. They bought whatever shares. Like you bought $300 worth of the Mario Brothers, you got out of it at 1,200.
And how can you like? How do you know that what you're buying is actually real? I guess it's like
You're
if they're
buying an
selling.
IOU from that company, and I mean, I think it's legitimate. So it's these companies are legally bound to provide you with your. I think they take fees. Is how they make money. So they're basically working like how a market maker stock market type of thing works, but
And you'd have
with
to confirm that
loose
the
goods.
item exists. You know.
Right. Well, they do all that, and I'm not saying you should do this. That's not my point. I'm saying this is a phenomenon caused by inflation. That's my idea.
Caused by what? Sorry.
Inflation. This is a
Okay.
phenomenon caused by inflation. What I'm saying is the same reason why people buy houses, buy index funds, da 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 da, is the same reason why people go hard into collectibles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they're wanting to get some value and they're trying to beat inflation. That's why the
Right.
stuff tends to rise with inflation. You don't make crazy gains most of the time. Like I've been a video game collector forever, and you have too. But all those games have gone up in value for the most part, especially the ones that are more desirable, because there is a limited supply, and there's the demand goes. If the demand goes up, then you can make a little money, and I think that's driven by the idea of, hey, at least I get to own this game and it's cool and it's collectible. Same thing with cards and fine art, fine wine, and NFTs are just a digital extension of that.
Right.
That's my idea. Is like the reason why all this stuff goes up crazy amounts of money is just people are looking for other ways to put money somewhere, basically.
Yeah. And I think that nails it really.
So yeah, I actually put this slide. What does this phenomenon mean? So oh yeah, this is an image of the NFT. So NFTs are being fractionalized too. I don't know if I emphasize that.
Okay.
So you want to own a hundredth of a CryptoPunk?
Yeah.
That's
That seems
insane.
a little risky.
That's crazy to me. Like it's just bonkers. I think these are all just little games people play to get outside the system and find more money to dump somewhere. So
I really
yeah,
this honestly this reminds me of what we were talking about last week with I forget what you called it, but it was like these collectives who
DAOs,
per, yeah, DAOs, yeah. Yeah.
collectives.
Reminds me
I think that's a cooler name, collectives.
of that.
The collectives. But you think it's the same idea?
I mean, I'm just saying because it's like one there's one item and there's a group of people that own it.
Right.
And how the DAOs are operating, they were purchasing an NFT
Right. Yeah.
through
Yeah,
with
that's
multiple
right.
people.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that one specifically. That was the what was it? Dune, the Dune
The
DAO,
Dune thing, yeah.
the
And so
Dune DAO.
and so essentially each of them, and I think the way they structured it is like the entity itself owns it,
Right.
whereas with this, the individuals would own a share. But
I actually like the DAO structure better. If you want to know the truth, the reason why is because it's like I own a part of this entity. The entity owns it. You know what I'm saying? The other way is I have to trust this company to make sure I get my ownership of it fulfilled whenever we sell.
right, yeah,
I almost prefer the DAO structure. You're kind of making a good argument for the DAO thing, but I definitely think there's going to be stuff like that too. Like, yeah, there could be a collectible graded video game DAO that just like says we're gonna buy all the NES games or something. I don't know. And they raise
yeah,
money to buy all the NES games. I don't know. I'm not saying that will happen, but that could be a thing if people are crazy enough to do it.
yeah, definitely.
I mean, people are crazy enough to buy into a DAO that sells a picture of a monkey, an ape. So
Yeah,
anything's possible right now.
we're in clown world.
So how does demand for these items sustain itself in our current system? How do they sustain themselves? What do you think? Like fine art, like you're like, oh, I want to own a piece of the Monet or something, or whatever the hell they're buying. Like, how does that sustain itself? What are the mechanisms in place to like get people to do this? What do you think?
I'm not really sure. It's a hard question.
I think it's marketing mostly. Like
What do you
it's
mean?
think about YouTube or think about video. We'll stay with video games for a minute. Think about what's the name of them? GameStack, Metal Jesus Rocks,
Hmm.
Happy Console Gamer. All of those YouTubers that we've watched for years. What are they actually doing in terms of from this perspective? What are they doing?
I'm not sure. What do you mean? I'm not sure.
They're marketing retro game collecting every single day, pumping it every day, getting
Right.
more people into the hobby. Dude, retro games used to not be that expensive. When these YouTubers broke out and freaked out and got really big, prices went up big time. They have affected the prices. That's
Oh
what I'm
yeah.
saying. Yeah, marketing, onboarding new collectors, and keeping them interested in it, and showing them new games to collect, and da 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 da. I think that's why. And the same thing with like fine art and stuff. It's the same kind of idea. NFTs. So they have all these little communities, and they pump up the price, and they just love it. You know, they get all into it. Same thing with baseball cards. It's the hobby itself. It's the community.
Right. I just don't know if it would have the same sort of appeal if you're only buying like a share of something,
Oh,
you
I
know?
agree. I don't find that appealing either. Like that's
Yeah.
like to me at that point buy a stock. Like
Yeah.
why? Like because that to me like that's the not cool thing about stocks is like oh I gotta own this like kind of nameless thing. I don't really know what the hell's going on with it. It's bringing it back to that.
Yeah, I mean the idea of like owning a stock of Mario on the Nintendo, like that
It's not appealing at all to me. It's not appealing in the
yeah.
slightest. That's why I would rather own the actual item, and it's like cool. It's part of my collection, and I can show it off and stuff.
And really the only items that this would work for is insanely expensive ones.
Well, that's what they're doing. They're only doing insanely expensive ones.
Yeah.
But still, it's still like I'd rather just buy a stock at that point.
Yeah, I totally agree.
But I do see that there will be people who are interested because people will think that's cool. I mean, they're like,
I
well, I can't afford this, so at least I can say I own a part of it or something.
I wonder like these museums and stuff if they started like selling shares of like the Mona Lisa or something, as like a way to make money.
I mean, it's not a bad idea. Or you could, or I mean, you could say they do it, and then they could say, Look, this is owned by all these people. They could like put a plaque outside of it or something, put your name on it.
Right.
I mean, that would be a bad way to make money. I don't know if they'll
Yeah.
do it. They got more integrity, I feel like, but maybe they don't. I don't know. Do you
I don't know.
think? Sorry, good.
I was gonna say there might be some sort of laws where like nobody can own it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it depends on the. There's definitely private museums.
Yeah,
So
for
which one do you think is? Do you think there's one that's better than the other, or do you think they're all like in terms of like if I say Clint, you either got to invest in graded games or invest in fine art. Which one do you choose? Do you think there's actually one even better than the other, or do you think it's about the same?
um, I'd say right now, like fine art is probably the better one, just based on it's got the history.
Right. Okay.
Um,
Let me put it a little bit differently. If I said you got to put $100 into fine art, or like you want to buy $100 worth of the Mona Lisa or $100 of Mario 64 perfectly graded, you'd choose the art for sure.
I think I would. Yeah.
I can see that because it's like slightly more conservative investment. Yeah, like you said, it's got the history behind it. It's like an antique.
Right.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, in terms of if I was seriously going to like seriously invest in something that's not a stock or something, yeah, I mean fine art would be like if any of these fractional shares, the only one I would even remotely take serious is fine art.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. And fine wine is just I don't even know a thing about it. That seems weird. I wouldn't touch that.
Yeah. I don't know nothing about that.
But this is all new and that could be a fad, like you said, because collectibles have like different states that they're in. Like video games are going through a new era of graded stuff, and it's making a big price increase. But it doesn't mean it always will do that, because like we said, you always have to onboard new people. This is purely this is Ponzi economics for sure. Like 100% is what it is.
I don't see this really taking off for a majority of cases. I can see there being like one or two, or more than that, multiple um, items where they're so expensive and people want a share of it, and then I can see that happening. But
Right, right. But yeah, I can see what you're saying. There definitely is some that are. I was going to say no, they're all about the same. But yeah, I think you're right. There is difference. Like art is more historical, so it would be safer.
right,
But if you were going for purely gains and speculation, you might want to do one of the newer ones. So
yeah, you might want to do one of the video games because it could be shoot up in price.
right, I don't think the Mona Lisa is going to double overnight.
Right.
It'll go from 500 million to a billion or whatever it is. I don't know how much it's worth, but anyways. So I put this last slide, and I think this sums it up. I put this in there just because I think it relates to Bitcoin because it shows the monetary debasement and the runoff of the Fed spigot into sectors that are strange, i.e., video games and NFTs are monetizing. Do you agree with that?
Let me read it again. Hold on.
I'm not saying these things are worthless. I think the way they're being treated as investments is strange.
Yeah, it's just the monetary debasement and the
When I say the Fed spigot, that was just saying the Fed printing money, like the inflation that they're causing through the creation of money, creation of dollars.
okay. Yeah, yeah,
So people, it just goes back to the we're trying to escape inflation thing.
right,
So
right.
I'm going to throw my money into a Michael Jordan card or a Mario 64 because we'll see what happens. Screw it.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So one more question. I just thought about this. Do you think if the world did come onto the Bitcoin standard, do you think these hobbies would have the kind of meteoric rise that they do now, or do you think that would largely go away? Not saying they become worthless, but the idea of investing in them.
Okay, so if we if Bitcoin took over,
Right.
would people still invest in like video game collecting? Is that what you're asking?
Correct. Correct.
Um,
Or
I
I shouldn't
think
put it I shouldn't put it in binary terms. Do you think it'll be lesser?
I think it'll be lesser, definitely.
Yeah.
I think people still would do it, but there would be less of a desire to do it, at least for money. Um,
Right.
you still have people doing it for, you know, because they enjoy it, that kind of thing. But
That's the beautiful thing too, because these prices are crazy. It's priced people out of the hobby. I know people who used to make videos about video games, and they just stopped doing video games. They invest. They're buying VHS tapes now because video games have just gotten so expensive. They don't fuck with it anymore.
yeah,
Because the collectability factor is not really about collecting them anymore. It's more than that now. It's about kind of investing in them and treating them as an investable hobby.
right. I mean, because back in a decade ago, 2012, video games weren't talked about as an investing opportunity, like for the most part. I mean,
Yeah.
the idea that it's some sort of investment really is only pretty recent, like the last couple of years.
Right. I mean, it was a demand and supply thing, but it wasn't like people were. I mean, it was always sort of a little bit of an investment thing to it. Because I remember thinking, like, ooh, if I buy these sealed games, it'll probably go up in value over time.
But
Probably.
nothing like it is now.
No, nothing like it is now. But I remember thinking, like, oh, this will be even more rare. Supplies less, so but people will want it one day. So it was like but that's actually will always be the case. Like that's like a demand supply game.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it right now. I'm just saying I think this will lessen, and people will be like, people who don't really have that much interest in the hobby won't get into it because they'll just be like, why would the hell would I do that? I'll just put it in my savings account. That's pointless.
Right.
Because right now they're thinking, well, I might make money this way. I might be able to maintain my value. They don't
Right.
think that way. That's not literally what they're thinking, but that's what they're doing.
That's what their brain's doing.
That's what their brain's doing. Yeah, That's why I stuck these last few slides in there just to kind of show some more, weird ways things are, and it's basically like video games and cards and all these things are monetizing. Is a good way to put it. Like they're taking a form of monetary economic value, from so, and I think that's true in a lot of different things. There's more than just that too. Stuff that really shouldn't be monetized in a way because it's not like a good thing because that keeps people who really want to collect the stuff out of it.
Yeah, it hurts the hobby.
Yeah, it does. Like I'm not gonna say. I think hurting the hobby might be strong, but it brings people into it for reasons other than just collecting.
Right. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, hurting it. I mean, technically, it helps it from a money perspective, but I don't think it's a good thing long term.
I guess
For
I mean from the perspective of like a lowly collector, you know.
right. I mean, and personally, right now though, this is the cool thing. It got me into it, and I do think there's value to graded games. Like I think it actually adds value to the game. I truly believe that because you're standardizing the condition. That is a utility there. There's actual value there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you.
So it's not like it's bullcrap. There should have been an increase in prices because it does add value to the games. However, the crazy speculation of it, that is what's been bizarre. But one thing that's cool that's happened is this year the prices are declining big time. And I've been buying some of those graded games that last year I could not buy because every single graded game was going for over $400. It was
Right.
like impossible to find, and only ones that were going for a reasonable price were games that weren't that interesting, and even those were going for $150.
Yeah, the market was insane.
Right, and now I can get cool sealed graded games for a price that actually makes sense to me. When you take into account that it costs money to send a game in and get graded, I am glad I got into it. 'Cause I think it's a cool. Like I'm actually probably gonna sell most of my cartridges and stuff, because I don't find that appealing anymore because back then, for cartridges and stuff, it was more about playing them. But now the emulation tools are so crazy. Like, and before it was also like, well, you know, it's not the real game. But now they make I have that cartridge, with all the SD card on it, and so I'm actually playing it on the system too. With all
Yeah,
the there's really like the cartridge's playability value is kind of like negligible at this point because there's so many other options that are cheaper and better.
right.
So I'm kind of over collecting. I'm still going to keep the ones I actually care. Basically, I'm going to trim down my collection to the games I actually care about in terms of cartridges and loose games. Now,
Yeah,
the games that are complete in box and got manuals and stuff, I will still sell some of those, but I will keep some that are rare and stuff because I think they're cool. But like cartridges, I don't really care if they're rare. I want to get I because they're not as rare as like complete in box. So I'm just kind of over those basically.
yeah, yeah.
Is there anything you wanted to add before we wrap up? But I didn't really have anything else to add. That was really the whole thing. I just wanted to talk about the idea, and a lot of people think it's going to happen, but we'll see.
Uh, I don't have much to add. I mean, I think I don't know if we'll see 100% adoption or anything like that, but
Right.
um, I think that's the direction we're headed. Is and
Did you know about El Salvador?
yes, I did, yeah.
That's pretty
And
interesting.
yeah, the more countries and states and stuff that we see adopting it, it's just it's that self-fulfilling prophecy, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the quote unquote. I think the quote unquote potential is if today it was like suddenly evaluated like people say it should be, it'd be 3,000x today. Now, over
Yeah, and
time, as we saw, because of inflation and technology and stuff, it'd be worth even more in dollar terms.
right, right.
Because of how because things will deflate over time. That's another thing I think people are brainwashed into thinking is I've heard somebody on YouTube the other day say inflation's a good thing.
Yeah, I've heard people say that too.
Why? Why? That's not a good thing. Why is that a good thing?
I, I don't. I mean, I've heard people say like it can be good in like some situations and stuff.
I don't understand those situations.
Yeah,
How is it ever a good thing? I think I've heard something about. I think it's just because of how our. I think it's actually a good thing considering our system. Our system is just really weird.
yeah.
It's
I mean,
not the
on
best
the face
system,
of it, it's not a good thing.
right? But if you dig into it, it might be a good thing because of like illiquidity, banks going under, and things like that, which would not be good for everybody.
Right.
It's like we're basically printing money to keep up this, to prop up the system and keep it going.
Yeah.
So I mean that's what happened in the 2008 2009 crisis. So that was, and coincidentally that's when Bitcoin was created. A lot of people say that it was created in reaction to the financial crisis.
I didn't know that.
I don't know if you do this too. This is just kind of interesting fact. Bitcoin is not the first cryptocurrency. It's the first cryptocurrency to actually have adoption.
Ah,
There
what
was
was the
some.
first one?
I don't know what the first one is, but I know there was the one called Hash Cash, and there was one created even back in the 80s.
What? Wow.
I'm dead because the whole internet was created back early 80s. Like people back then were talking about this is necessary in order to because they this might need to be a whole nother podcast, but I'll say that for the next time because there's a lot of cool interesting things about that actually.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know anything about that, so that'd be neat.
Yeah, we can talk about that. Anyways, I do want to show off my website real quick. Let me bring it up. So I run a website called CryptoIRLFTW.com, crypto in real life. You can wear your favorite crypto in real life. It's got there's different shirts, different designs, and hats and different things like that. It's kind of fun and interesting. Check it out if you get a chance. I ship for free in the U.S. for orders $50 or more. Thanks for listening. If you happen to listen to the whole thing, and please like and subscribe. Whichever I upload to TikTok, YouTube, and I put it on Spotify as well. Just like and subscribe it, and keep listening to us. Clint, do you have anything else you want to add?
Uh, I enjoyed the show. Thanks for having me on.
All right, we'll talk later.